This video is the first in a series examining the capture of state attorneys general offices by special interests. This capture is part of a campaign that one lawyer described to a donor as going after climate denialism, along with a bunch of state and local prosecutors nationwide, though it's not limited to climate. Following this overview, we'll examine the influence of the activist donor, particularly a scheme by billionaire climate activist and candidate for the Democratic nomination for president, Michael Bloomberg. Part 2 will examine the influence of the tort bar. Attorneys general offices became the focus of progressive donors and activists after the election of Donald Trump. AG offices were viewed as the platform from which to launch the progressive agenda, which Trump's election had frustrated. One aspiring AG swooned that it's so free from interference, you can just sue and go after people. You just do it. Former Associate Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson famously wrote about the prosecutor that at his best he is one of the most beneficent forces in society. When he acts from malice or other base motives, he's one of the worst. Justice Jackson wrote that the greatest threat of prosecutorial abuse lies in one who selects some group of unpopular persons and then looks for an offense. Then, the real crime becomes that of being unpopular with the predominant or governing group, of being attached to the wrong political views. Which brings us to the climate issue. With climate, we see the threat is no longer merely academics being told they've been put on a list, and if they don't like that, they should think about keeping quiet. Or legislators looking to criminalize skepticism of climate alarm, though that continues. Or even congressional committees and presidential candidates warning against wrong speak, the one truth to be decided, of course, by them. It's more than a candidate vowing to use his power as president to tell us what kind of electricity we can have, what kind of cars you can build, what kind of houses we can have, as he put it. It's much worse. While few are likely surprised by the UN calling for prosecution of climate crime, recall that the draft Paris Climate Treaty had a climate court, surely to return should the U.S. rejoin. In the U.S., there's now a handy roster of promises made by aspiring presidents of how they will prosecute political opponents of this agenda. No mention of what crime they've committed. Show me the man, as the saying goes. What is happening here in the U.S. is alarming. As foreseen by Justice Jackson, in times of hysteria, political, social, and economic groups cry for the scalps of individuals or groups because they do not like their views. We are seeing the actual weaponization of law enforcement for political and even private ends. The pattern is to investigate parties, opponents, as opposed to crimes, employing the law as a political force multiplier against opponents by the tort bar and activist donors. Lest you think we exaggerate, consider this email sent from a law professor to her center's largest private donor, explaining that a gathering of attorneys general, lawyers, activists, and the tort bar was about going after climate denialism along with a bunch of state and local prosecutors nationwide. Here's the agenda for that meeting, explaining the objective was to determine potential state causes of action against energy companies, meaning attorney general investigations. Not only was the briefing for AG lawyers, but for, quote, prospective funders. Think about that one. One presenter called it the secret meeting at Harvard in 2 emails. In fact, we had to sue just to obtain the agenda from a participating attorney general who fought it for 18 months to keep it secret. The agenda shows that activists implored AGs to sue energy companies for something they call climate nuisance, as well as consumer protection claims. Someone from UCLA made that pitch. A document obtained from one participating AG's office, California's, shows that that someone was the same UCLA instructor who boasted to her financial benefactor about going after climate denialism, whatever that is, along with a bunch of prosecutors. As we will detail further, climate is promiscuously touted as the reason for norm-busting practices in law enforcement. AGs launching investigations of private parties at the request of the tort bar, with one recent incident sweeping up over 100 individuals and think tanks in addition to the usual corporate suspects being rounded up. Donors are now financing and planting special assistant attorneys general, and both are targeting the same parties, those who stand in the way. Intimidation, silencing opposition, massive financial settlements to distribute to political constituencies, and agreement to help put the foiled agenda in place are the goals.